Welcome everyone to Raw Sport. We have another big one for you. It's Wednesday here in Australia. Massive fight weekend. Australia represented on the world stage. And boy, do we have a huge guest that was there. My co-host, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Tony Sheehan. How are you, buddy?
Great to be back on Raw Sports. I can't wait to get stuck into the next guest who's fresh off a plane from the United States.
Mr. Bedell, how are you, buddy?
Hello, team. How are you going? I'm feeling good, boys. Life's good in premium economy on United Airlines.
Awesome to
See,
you, brother.
Hey, see the beauty of journalism at News Corp, and Pete can just walk straight into the left of the plane, into the nose. He's a big shot these days.
That's it, mate. It's well earned, mate. It's well earned. Pete, huge fight night in Las Vegas. Tszyu takes a late notice fight against the giant Fundura. Originally had Thurman scheduled, very different fighters. So everything had to be sort of rejuggled, the thought process, the training, everything. Not much you can do within 10 to 12 days anyway, but you know, that mindset had to be shifted. You were there, you were watching main event, and your beautiful face was on screen alongside the great Andre Ward. You had some interesting conversations. Take us through fight week. What was that like?
Yeah, boys, look, it was an amazing experience. I mean, I think, Tim Tszyu always talked about wanting to be on the big stage in Vegas. Well, he got a taste of it. And I've got to say, guys, being there, it was unlike anything you see in Australian boxing. I mean, usually you go to a press conference in Australia and you might get a couple of journos and a few support teams around the boxes. But being there at MGM Grand, where we were staying, including the Tszyu camp, it was carnival atmosphere every day. There was a boxing ring right at the foyer when you first checked in. There was boxing ropes and a boxing ring with a big line in the middle. And through the week, there was the grand arrivals every day, or about 3 days out, where all the fighters were introduced. So there really was a carnival atmosphere, and there were so many boxing fans and a lot of Australians. Surprisingly, I was surprised at the reception that Tim got. I thought he'd get a lot of boos initially, but he got more applause than Fundora did in the build-up. So, but even I remember the press conference a couple of days before, there was about 200-300 people in the room, and Tim was just lapping it up. I mean, he felt like this was always where he wanted to be, and he was there in front and centre, and it was a great week, and it was an occasion befitting someone of Tim's fighting ability.
Yeah, that golden line, mate, at the MGM Ground as soon as you enter. I was there a few years ago. I even took a photo there. So, awesome, man. I mean, of course, media, the world's watching. Tim Tszyu, biggest fight of his life. And what happens? At the end of the second round, he hits him and ducks his head in and walks straight into his elbow. And we have this big gash right there. And you have blood coming down. It's almost like when you're in a car and it's raining hard and you need to turn on the windscreen wipers. The problem is that there's no wipers here and blood is thick. It's not sweat. So it does impair your vision. Take us from there. What happened? Why did it all go downhill from there, in my opinion, anyway?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I was trying to think of a like-for-like analogy for the common man, and I thought of the same thing. I thought of, if it's pissing down on the freeway and you're trying to see, you've got zero visibility, and the next minute a car comes out of nowhere and you ram into it. I mean, I can only imagine that's what Tim was seeing half the time, just with tinges of red. And what he did was so heroic. But I think, boys, I think it was a disgrace that the fight wasn't stopped. I believe the doctor should have stopped the fight. But then when he chose not to, I think Tim's corner were probably, I don't know, maybe they were overconfident. I think they felt that Tim could overcome the adversity, being the champion and the warrior that he is, to win the fight. But I think if this was a Jeff Fennick, and we know Jeff's the master of gamesmanship, we've seen Jeff do it before with his fighter Hass Hamden last year. I think they should have got to the end of the fourth, said to the trainers, to the doctor, look, Tim can't see, this fight has to be stopped. And if they do that, the judges can't rule even. Tim retains his belt. We have a rematch down the track. But look, that's that's, in the fullness of time with 2020 vision, pardon the pun, guys. But I guess, when you're Eagle, Tim's trainer in the corner, maybe they felt that they were going to win the fight from there and they wanted to press on. But I think it was a dangerous decision and ultimately a costly one for them.
Pete, back here in Australia, a lot of people were talking about why the fight wasn't stopped. And obviously it kept going the full length. And we now understand that it was a split decision. But there's been some criticism labelled at the Tszyu camp. Is there, could they have rectified this during the fight and said either stem the bleeding and or called the fight off?
Well, Tone, I know I've spoken to a few experienced cut men, and I know I see Stitch Duran came out and was quite critical of Team Tszyu, saying that, while it was a tough cut to stop, that they should have actually had the fight stopped to prevent the danger of more excess bleeding. But I know, talking to a few cut men, they were saying some of the materials the Tszyu team used, they probably could have had bigger jumbo-sized buds to stop the blood. Ultimately, they were saying, look, it was just that artery in that top of that part of the head. You were never going to stop the bleeding completely. So let's support Team Tszyu there. But I felt that where Team Tszyu were, I think they could have put more pressure on the doctor to stop the fight and protected Tim. I mean, that's the corner's job. But look, I heard Igor, Tim's trainer, say, look, they actually suggested that to the doctor. So in fairness to the Tszyu camp, apparently they made some presentations and the doctor said the fight had to continue. So look, I think ultimately, Tone, it's a learning lesson, and it just goes to show, doesn't it, the experience of a great cut man. I mean, cut mans can be the difference between victory and failure. And hopefully down the track for Tim, they probably will be better prepared for such a circumstance. And we should have thought it could happen, guys, given the height differential, that Fundora's elbow could have easily hit Tim in the head. But it's easy to say that after the fact.
He had the fight in the bag. I mean, he was busting him up. It was he actually looked amazing, and his ability to parry is unbelievable. Many have labelled him the most technical fighter to come out of Australia since in the last 10, 15 years. He looked very, very impressive, which is why everyone is so disappointed, because he really should have been. He really should have had his hand raised. Some in the boxing world have labelled the Tszyu camp as arrogant, on the basis of going into this fight underprepared from the corner side and letting the fight go on. I don't agree. I'm just saying, was that perception shared around in the post presses in the event there? Because I'm watching these feedback shows online, and a lot of people are saying they should have been a lot more prepared, and the only way you can overlook things is it's arrogance, apparently. But Americans are Americans. Was that the common consensus?
Oh, well, look, I know Ahmed, talking to some of the American journalists over there, and even Andre Ward, who was on the main event coverage, he was blown away by Tim's bravery and his courage. I mean, I didn't hear one American journalist bag Tszyu, nor the Tszyu camp. I think it's ridiculous to suggest they were arrogant. I don't believe they were. Look, if anything, you said it best before, Ahmed. I think if Tim Tszyu is cut-free, blood-free, he would have stopped Fundora within 6 to 7 rounds, in my opinion. He was all over him in the first 2 rounds. His power was really rocking Fundora, and I believe it would have been only a matter of time before he went to the body and then brought his hands down. And I believe he would have TKO'd him within 6 or 7. So, look, I think he wins a rematch drama-free. But, look, it's a learning lesson for Tim Tszyu, and even at the top level, sometimes not every contingency is catered for, and that can be sometimes the difference between success and failure. And I think Tim, next time when he returns to the ring, guys, he'll be better for it, and so will his team.
Pete, speaking of rematch, the fight finishes. Tim's in the ring, Fonduro's in the ring, and then Errol Spence jumps in. And Sam Watson's there, which I know. When Sam's always there, but nothing happens without his approval or PBC's approval. So Errol Spence jumps in the ring. Nobody mentions a rematch. You were at the post-fight press conference. What do you make of all this? I mean, I heard that they mentioned it in the post-fight press conference, but what for Spence to come into the ring that's not good science, because PBC has a record of taking these belts and putting it into the PBC ecosystem and never coming back out.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's guys. Look, we all know what boxing can be like. There's often a lot of theatre. There's some hyperbole, and I have no doubt that was all set up. I'm told that PBC told Spence to get into the ring. I don't think Spence was overly keen to do it, but it clearly was all strategically staged for him to get in there and create a bit of drama, almost like WWE theatre. Look, I believe it's a good point you make, Ahmed, about, look, ultimately we're a small country, 25 million people. In the boxing world and the ecosystem of politics, in pugilism, I don't think Australia rank very highly. We know that. And the Americans are going to naturally say, look, stuff the Aussies. We've got Fundora as the champ. We'll organise bouts against Spence or Crawford. But guys, if you listen to Samson Lukovic, Fundora's promoter, he's prepared to honour his word of a rematch. He says there's only a verbal agreement. I've been told otherwise by Tim Tszyu. I'm told there is a contractual obligation there. So, look, I think, guys, we will see a rematch. It was originally slated for Australia. I tend to think now, if you're Fundora, why would you come down under a risk giving up home advantage? I think the rematch will be in Vegas, but let's just hope Tim gets a rematch, because, as you said, Ahmed, that the politics of boxing, America tend to get their way and the big promoters in America get their way. So I hope Tim doesn't get stiffed on this one.
Pete, of the three judges that scored the fight the other night, one of them had Tszyu in front at the end of the decision. Who do you think won?
Yeah, look, I thought that was the wrong call, Tone. I mean, look, we're all proud Aussies. I wanted Tim to win, but I got to be honest, I scored at about 115, 113, even 116, 114 to Fundora. I thought there could have been a few 10-10 rounds there. They were very close, but I don't think Tim won the fight. And look, the blood was a mitigating factor, no doubt about that. But I thought Fundora's jab was undersold. I mean, that's the fundamental punch in boxing, and I think he had about 400 odd jabs to Tim's 117, 4 times as many jabs, and it was very similar to Haney v Kambosos, where Haney in fight one just jabbed the hell out of George, and I thought it was beautiful execution from Fundora. He was more active, his volume was better. I thought his accuracy wasn't great. He didn't have the power that Tim had, but I think I like the fact that the judges rewarded his jabbing effectiveness, because I think that was a crucial punch in that fight, given the circumstances.
Yeah, understandably. And just for all the sports fans out there, Pete, can you explain the difference or the discrepancy in height between Fundora and Tszyu?
Yeah, Tone. Well, so Tim stands 175 centimetres. Fundora was 197 centimetres. So it was a 22 centimetre differential. Now, to contextualise it, it was the greatest height differential for a non-heavyweight contest in boxing history. So in more than 100 years of boxing history, outside the heavyweight division, we've never seen such a discrepancy. That was the challenge Tim Tszyu faced. And Fundora also had a 203 centimetre reach. So the fact that Tim even dominated the first 2 rounds was testament to his ability and his power and how special a fighter he is. And I think, guys, Tim, he will come back and be a world champion again. I've got no doubt about that. He will dominate this 154 division, and then he'll move up to middleweight and do some damage there.
Did you think after the fight that there was any sign or suspicion that he was suffering concussion?
No, I don't think so, Tone. Look, he spoke with quite decent clarity at the press conference and a lot of humility. So I think I had a doctor contact me on email saying that Tim would have lost a lot of blood, which really affected his performance, and probably would have needed a couple of bags of blood afterwards. So that's fascinating to hear a doctor say that. But he was quite coherent afterwards and spoke well. So I don't know how affected he was, but he looked to be tiring, didn't he, boys? In the last few rounds, it looked like he couldn't have gone much longer.
Yeah, well, go on, Tony.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Pete, by extension of what you just told us about that doctor, which is potentially huge, do you know if Tszyu spent any time with doctors and or in a hospital after the fight?
No, I'm told he didn't go to hospital, but he does have Dr. Bill Anseline in his entourage. Now, Dr. Bill's 62 years old. He's one of the best surgeons in Australia. So he's very well versed in those head cuts. And he even said to us after at the team hotel, having assessed it, he said, short of taking him into theatre and stitching him up, you were not going to stop the bleeding. So it didn't matter how good the cut man was. Even Stitch Duran has admitted that when he represented some fighters in the corner, even with Klitschko, he said there was a fight where Klitschko had a cut right across the forehead, and he basically told him, go out and win this round, and when we stop the fight, win the title, because there's only so much you can do with certain cuts, and this was as bad a cut as it could get in boxing.
Yeah, I mean, that cut would have 100% slowed Tim down. And even if you look at his reflexes during the fight, they started to also slow down. He wasn't as sharp as he was at the beginning. And it's understandable, mate. You're losing blood at a crazy speed. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting. But anyway, we'll keep going. All the Aussies lost over the weekend. Wilson lost and Zarafa lost. It was a bit of a setback for Aussie boxing. What's next?
Well, guys, look, Aussie boxing is in a golden age, isn't it? I mean, when you look at the fights that are coming up in the coming months, so I don't think this is by any means a blemish on Australian boxing. In fact, it's just the beginning. I mean, George Kambosos has a world title fight against Loma in May. Liam Paro will fight for a world title against Subriel Matthias at super lightweight. Jason Maloney's a world champion. Jai Pataya will fight to get his world title back against the Great Breeders. They had that wonderful war a couple of years ago on the Gold Coast. You know, Justice Hooney's rising up the ranks of the heavyweight division. Andrew Maloney's fighting for an interim world title in Perth. So, look, guys, this is, you know, it was disappointing for Liam and Michael Zarafa. I felt for Michael. I thought he was very disappointing. I expected a lot more from him. But around the corner, Tone and Ahmed, we've got some great fights, haven't we, for Australian boxers in the coming months.
Absolutely.
Pete, I actually think the split decision for Tim Tszyu might have done more for him than actually winning the fight, because now that people understand what he went through and the pictures are so gruesome, and fighting through that bloodied face, I actually think it could go for him, even though the decision didn't.
Yeah, no, look, it's a great point, Tone. I mean, I know, you know, sometimes in defeat, the vanquished can be celebrated. And I think far from Tim's legacy or reputation being dented here in America, he's been elevated. I mean, talking to even Andre Ward on the coverage off camera, he was blown away by Tim's bravery and said, mate, what a warrior to go 10 rounds with that amount of blood. So I don't think this damages Tim at all. And I think it's a great point, Tone. I think it's elevated his status in America. He's got great respect now across the board in one of the biggest countries in the world. And I think that only helps him when it comes to getting the big fights again at the negotiating table.
And Pete, think of all the replays that he will get and the promos in the future, with that bloodied face and what he did against Fundura, I think can only actually work in his favour.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, can I ask you this one, Ahmed or Tone? Look, how far do you think this sets back Tim in terms of climbing back up for a Crawford or Spence shot? How far? Do you think it's a year or so?
Like I said to you, my only concern is if the whole PBC model happens and they go into that mode of where they start moving the belt internally into the ecosystem and then give them the fight back. What are you going to do? Take him to court? Good luck fighting it out. And then you end up in this debacle. And PBC and Al Heyman have a record of doing this. So it's not like it's new information. So this is my concern, and I'm actually of the belief that the rematch will not happen. Unfortunately, as much as we love him, Tszyu and the Tszyu camp, and we want it to happen, I firmly believe with all the circus that happened after the fight, bringing in Spence and doing what they did, that's a huge sign that this rematch will not move forward.
It's a fascinating comment, Ahmed. I mean, that is my fear, because we've seen it happen where Australian boxers get stiffed before. And even, guys, I've got to say, we talk about disadvantages. I thought if you saw the scorecards for the Liam Wilson fight, that was one of the most disgraceful cards I've ever seen. One judge gave Valdez all 6 rounds, which is embarrassing. I mean, Liam won the first 2 rounds in my mind. He certainly won the first. Second could have gone either way, but I know Liam had a little bit of blood after the second round on his nose, but I thought Liam boxed beautifully in the first 2 rounds. So for him, there was a criticism that he went into the pocket that he should have stayed at range. But judging by the judges' scorecard, if he stayed at range, he would have had no chance of winning the fight. So, we always know, guys, when Australians go overseas, Tone, they're up against the wall.
Yeah,
Sure.
Peter, totally agree. And why don't we look at, well, I shouldn't say we, but in terms of the boxing world, the American boxing community, and also No Limit, turn around and say, Tim Tszyu turns 30 in November. Why don't we give him his world title shot on the eve of his 30th birthday?
Pretty optimistic.
Happy birthday, Tim. Look, I only hope, guys, that Samson Lukovic's words are his bond, as he says, and I think if he pushes for a rematch, I'd love to see. I mean, there's been talk that a rematch could happen here at Suncorp Stadium or Allianz in Sydney. I'd love to see a stadium fight here, but I think Fundora is too clever to come down here. I think we're going back to Vegas, and I think Tim will get the job done next time if he gets another chance. But it's up to PBC and then the American powerhouses and the strings, though, they'll invariably pull to maybe advance Spence or Crawford.
Well, we can only hope, brother. But the future doesn't look bright. I've just seen this movie a few times over. I hope they do have a contract. I really do hope, just for their sake. Because if they don't, my God, are they going to go on a bit of a merry-go-round? The fact it's just the way that the conversation after the fight was just so blatantly, what's next? It wasn't like, you're Tszyu, you're a warrior, you're this, you're that, you deserve a rematch. That came out after comments were made and so on and so on. So that's a big worry, in my opinion. I hope the No Limit team have it down pat. But anyway.
Well, so the other thing is, Ahmed,
the
WBO has also mandated, Crawford to fight. So let's just say that happens. Maybe Tim gets step-aside money a la Michael Zarafa. Michael had to wait 16 months for a shot at Lara. He should have fought him a lot earlier, but he took the step-aside money because he knew politically if he forced the case legally, he falls out with the American promoters and maybe his world title shot never comes. So that's the danger. No, that's right. So that's the danger.
And also, it's good that you mentioned that because the WBO came out and said Crawford's a mandatory. So already the sharks are circling from all fronts. So I personally see this rematch being very difficult to be made. There's too much money for a Errol Spence card to not happen, and Spence will smash Fundora. I mean, within 6 rounds, and I'm calling it here. That's it. Tszyu would have smashed him within 6 rounds, and I reckon Tszyu will give Spence a huge. It would have been a perfect step up moving into Spence because Spence is not what he used to be. Tszyu's a beast, mate. He just got unlucky. So that's my predictions. But the other side here is Zarafa Wilson. Is that the end? Have we seen the end? Those two.
You go, Tone.
Yeah.
No, you go, Pete.
Oh, look, guys. I think good question, Ahmed. I think it's not. I think it's not the end yet for Liam Wilson. He's young enough, like he's 28. But look, it is an enormous mountain to climb, and maybe I think there's sometimes a very small difference between being world class and world class. And I think Liam's a world class fighter, but does he have that extra 5% to really reign as a world champion? Maybe he needs the right fighter in the right division. It's going to be a very long road back for Liam. I think he's talked about maybe going up to lightweight. I know he wants to have a crack at Kambosos, but jumping up in another division, does he have the power at that weight to be effective? I don't know. So look, it's going to be a tricky one for Liam Wilson. Hey, look, I was talking to him at the airport after the fight, and he thinks he's got about 3 to 4 years left as a pro. So
optimistic.
Yeah, that is optimistic. But whether he can climb the mountain again. But look, with Zarafa, guys, after his performance against Creati, I thought that was very insipid. I think the best version of Michael Zarafa could have been competitive against Lara, but for me, Lara wasn't just one level above; he was 2 or 3, and he set the trap. He set the trap beautifully for Michael. He walked into it, and I don't think at age 32, time's running out for Michael. I don't know if that could be his last crack at a world title. I don't know if he ever gets back there, but I'd love to as an Aussie boxing fan. But maybe he met his match against Lara, and he got a reality check about where he stands.
Absolutely, mate. I mean, yeah, I think we have seen the end for some, and we see still some light for others like Tszyu. Wilson, what was it? How long ago was it? He was a few seconds away from winning a world title, and then now all of a sudden he gets stopped against a pretty dumb Oscar Valdez, if we're going to be honest. Oscar's not what he used to be. He's been in too many wars. So at that level, it's, as you said, it's a different level. We wish him all the best. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our show, our segment. Thank you very much, Pete. It's been an absolute pleasure. We welcome you back home after a long journey from Vegas. Do you have any parting words for us, mate?
No, thanks, Sam. I always love being on this show. Love talking boxing, and look, I just it was a terrible weekend for Australian boxing over there, 0-3. I honestly thought we'd come back 1-2 at least. I genuinely thought Liam Wilson was a chance at his best, but overall, it was a wonderful week. It was a special weekend for Australian boxing. We may never see three guys fight for world titles in 24 hours, but I just hope that Tim Tszyu gets another chance, because this is not the end for him. He will conquer again, and I think sometimes in defeat you can be a better fighter and learn some harsh lessons. I think he'll be back, and I think within the next 12 to 18 months we'll see a better version of Tim Tszyu.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on Raw Sport. We'll catch you all next week. Thank you, Pete, and thank you, Tony. See you guys.
Thanks for joining.